Okay, girls, sit down because this one is messy and I swear it just keeps getting worse. So, you know how everyone has been talking about Blake Lively, and that whole situation with Justin Baldoni on set? Yeah, there's a new detail from her deposition, and it kind of flips the whole story into something way more questionable. So picture this. She's on set filming this bar scene, right? And she says under oath that Justin looked at her and called her sexy and hot, and she felt uncomfortable. That's been her whole angle. But when you actually break down what she described, it starts sounding different. She says she walked in wearing a coat, like part of the outfit, and he asked her to take it off. Now, obviously, if you're inside filming a party scene and nobody else is wearing a coat, that request doesn't sound crazy at all. It's literally his job as a director. But here's where it gets interesting. She says underneath the coat, she had a onesie zipped down low with a lace bra showing because apparently there was a hookup scene coming up, and she claims that's why she felt on display when he asked her to remove the coat. Now, tell me if this doesn't sound off. If you zipped your outfit down that much yourself, then what exactly were you expecting? Because nobody forced that zipper down. That was her choice. And from the footage people have seen, there's no clear lace bra moment like she's describing. And then she says he told her she looked sexy, and when she pushed back, he corrected himself and said hot, and then joked about missing an HR meeting, which honestly sounds like someone trying to lighten an awkward moment, not some villain speech. And here's another thing nobody's ignoring anymore. Justin's version of this whole situation is completely different. He says he was talking about the room being hot, like temperature, not her. Which, let's be real, makes just as much sense. Especially if the place was packed with crew and lights. And then you look at photos from outside that same shoot, and suddenly she's fully covered again with the coat back on. So now everyone's asking, if the whole point was to show the lace bra for that scene, why cover it up immediately after? It's these little details that start stacking up and making the story feel less clean than she's presenting. And you know how it is. Once people start spotting inconsistencies, they don't stop. And honestly, this is where it starts getting bigger than just one moment on set. Because now her credibility gets pulled into everything else she said. And speaking of that, there's another part of her deposition that people are talking about just as much, and it has nothing to do with that scene, but everything to do with her public image. Because when the lawyers started asking her about past backlash, she had to admit something that kind of weakens her whole case. And yeah, we're talking about that wedding situation with Ryan Reynolds. Ryan Reynolds, the one people dragged them for years over, she straight up said, the backlash back then was deserved. Not twisted, not exaggerated, deserved. And that right there is huge because it proves she's dealt with negative press long before this current drama, which completely messes with the narrative that everything happening now is some sudden, coordinated attack. Like, no, there's already history there. And once that gets brought into court, it changes how people look at the whole situation. Because now it's not just about one accusation, it's about patterns, perception, and whether the story being told now actually lines up with everything that came before. And trust me, once that door opens, a lot more gets questioned. And the craziest part is, this is only one section of what's coming out. There's still more testimony, more clips, and even things involving Ryan that people are starting to dig into. So if you thought this was already messy, just wait, because it only gets more chaotic from here. And honestly, I haven't even gotten to the wildest part, and this is where it starts getting even messier, because once people stopped focusing only on that bar scene, they started digging into everything else around her story, and that's when things really began to unravel. So going back to the deposition, when she was being questioned about her public image, she tried to play it like she's used to criticism, but hasn't really dealt with it that often. But the second the attorney brought up that plantation wedding with Ryan Reynolds she had to switch gears real quick. She admitted very clearly that the backlash they got was deserved. Not misunderstood, not blown out of proportion, deserved. And you could almost feel how careful she had to be there, because imagine saying anything else in front of a jury. That would have been a disaster. But here's the problem with that admission. The second she confirms she's had serious negative press before, it weakens this whole narrative that what's happening now is some sudden targeted smear campaign. Because now the argument becomes, if your reputation already took hits before, how can you say this one situation alone destroyed it? And let's be honest, people didn't forget that wedding. It came back up hard during the height of social conversations, and they had to do damage control, donations, statements, all of that. But like, did anyone really see a proper apology? Not really. So now in court, this becomes a pattern, not an isolated incident. And patterns are dangerous, especially when you're trying to prove someone else is responsible for your image being damaged. And it doesn't stop there. Because while all this is happening, people also started revisiting other controversies around her. Old interviews, awkward moments, even that whole situation where her private photos got leaked, which, by the way, caused a massive spike in public attention and criticism. So when her team brings in experts saying, oh, the negativity only peaked during this recent movie promotion, people are like, wait, that's not even true. There were bigger spikes before, and you know how the internet works. Once people feel like something isn't adding up, they go into full detective mode. Now, here's where things take a slightly weird turn, but also kind of revealing. Someone pulled up an old interview setup involving Ryan Reynolds, and it was one of those lie detector tests, you know, the kind where celebrities try to be funny but also low-key get exposed. It was done with Hugh Jackman asking the questions, and you could tell the questions were designed to stir things up a little. First, they asked him about leaking the Deadpool test footage years ago. At the time, it was a huge mystery, but now we know he actually did have a role in it. Back then, though, he dodged it in a joking way, saying something like he might have assisted, and the lie detector marked it as truthful. So already, you see how he plays with the truth in a very calculated, almost charming way. But then came the question that made everyone raise an eyebrow. They asked him straight up if Blake Lively is really his wife, and he said yes. The machine said truthful. Okay, normal so far. But then they followed it up with, is it an arrangement? And this is where it got interesting. He joked about it being a long contract, laughed it off, but the lie detector flagged his answer as deceptive. Now listen, lie detectors aren't perfect. We all know that. But still, the fact that this was the moment it flagged something, of all questions, that's what got people talking. Because there's always been rumors in Hollywood about relationships being more strategic than romantic. PR couples, image management, all of that. And the fact that this question even made it into the interview tells you it's not some random idea, it's something people in the industry whisper about. And suddenly, people started looking at their entire relationship a little differently. Not saying it's fake, but questioning how real it actually is behind the scenes. And then just to add another layer to this already chaotic situation, there was another interview clip floating around where Hugh Jackman jokingly described Ryan as charming in a way that felt almost too smooth. Like he literally compared his charm to someone who could fool you if you weren't paying attention. He said it in a joking tone, but you know when jokes hit a little too close to something real? That's the vibe people got. And now, with all these text messages, interviews, and past moments resurfacing, people are starting to connect dots that maybe weren't obvious before. Because at this point, it's not just about one accusation or one incident. It's about how everything, her statements, his behavior, their public image, all fits together. And honestly, once you start looking at it like that, the whole thing feels way less like a clean story and way more like something layered, complicated, and possibly very controlled behind the scenes. And we're still not even at the part where the public reaction gets brutal, because that's where things go from messy to straight up savage. And this is where it gets brutal, because once the public really started paying attention, it stopped being about facts and turned into pure perception, and perception is everything in Hollywood. People didn't just question the story anymore, they started dragging everything. Old photos, interviews, even their house. I'm not even kidding. There was this random article about their New York penthouse, like completely harmless, just showing the space. And suddenly the comment section turned into a full-on roast session. And not light teasing either. Like, people were going in, they were calling the place dark, creepy, saying it matched their energy, questioning why the article even came out now, accusing it of being planted PR to distract from everything happening. You know it's bad when even a home tour becomes suspicious. And then someone pointed out that Blake Lively designed parts of the space herself, including this open layout between the bedroom and bathroom. No walls, no doors. And the comments, absolutely ruthless. People were like, so you're just casually living with the toilet in full view. And apparently there was even a photo where she's eating a burrito and you can see the bathroom in the background. And once the internet sees something like that, it never lets it go. But underneath all the jokes, there's something more serious happening. The tone toward her and Ryan Reynolds too, has shifted. It's not just criticism anymore, it's distrust. And that's the worst place to be when you're trying to fight a case that depends on people believing you. Because think about it, if a jury, or even the general public, starts feeling like your story keeps changing or doesn't fully add up, they stop focusing on what happened and start focusing on you. Your past, your choices, your behavior, everything becomes fair game. And that's exactly what's happening here. The deposition didn't just raise questions about that one moment with Justin Baldoni. It opened the door to everything else. Her admitting past backlash, that matters. The inconsistencies in the outfit story, that matters. The timing of everything, that matters. And then you add in all these resurfaced clips of Ryan, his interviews, the lie detector moment, the way he jokes around, and suddenly people are analyzing him too. Not just as her husband, but as someone who might be more calculated than he lets on. And look, Hollywood is built on image. Everyone knows that. But the second people feel like the image doesn't match reality, they turn on you fast. And right now, it feels like that's exactly what's happening. The more that comes out, the less clean this whole situation looks. It's not even about picking sides anymore. It's about how believable the story is. And right now, there are just too many little things not lining up perfectly. And those little things, they're the ones that quietly destroy credibility over time. So, yeah, what started as one claim on a film set has now turned into this massive web of questions about behavior, past controversies, relationships, and even public image strategies. And honestly, the wildest part is we still don't have the full deposition. We've only seen pieces, which means there could be even more details sitting there waiting to come out. And if what we've already seen is enough to shake things this much, imagine what happens if more contradictions show up. At that point, it's not just messy, it's damaging in a way that's really hard to recover from. Because in Hollywood, you can survive a scandal, but surviving people no longer believing